out to Socrates. Socrates still trying to get the opening. Oh, Socrates! Whoa!
And there it is. The crazy gang have beaten the Culture Club.
Maggie Thatcher, can you hear me? Maggie Thatcher, your boys took a hell of a beating. Your boys took a hell of a beating.
Welcome to Your Boys Took a Hell of a Beating World Cup special. Aidan, what do we call these World Cup offshoots? It's
we're taking classic lines of commentary, which is very on theme, I think, for today. 86, you have to say that's magnificent.
Indeed it is. It is the great Barry Davies that we pay so much homage to on Your Boys Took a Hell of a Beating. But we have the next generation of Barry Davies for me and Aidan. This is we have the wonderful Sky Sports, Sky Sports commentator, ITV, a man who in less than 48 hours' time is jetting off as we record for America to give him our deep baritone voice for the World Cup. Seb Hutchinson, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me on. The nostalgia that you guys dip into is just somewhere I love to swim.
Oh, thank you so much, Seb. Seb, I mean, this one in particular, we've gone for a bit of a request. You know, we're going for a bit of a jukebox kind of theme here. Mm-hmm. Our guest comes along and suggests what they'd like to discuss in World Cup themes. World Cup 98, France, the summer of 1998. You know, I mean, as well as part of my introduction for Seb as well. One of only 4 commentators to commentate on an England senior side in a World Cup final. Just before we go, France 98. What was it like to commentate on? I know they fell short, but England's women's side in a World Cup final. That occasion. What did it feel like behind the microphone?
It's so hard to describe it afterwards because at the time, your mood before you do a game like that is different to afterwards. So with the Euros final, with the women's Euros final in Switzerland, what they achieved made that day feel so much more special. But because England lost the World Cup final, it's a really interesting situation. You feel like you've got so close to the line, but you've not got over the line. And I think every commentator who ever covers, gets the chance to cover, the privilege to cover an England game, that's what they're all striving for, isn't it? To have that moment to call and to do, they think it's all over, their version of it. So when I was doing that World Cup final, of course, that's in my mind all the time. But you also have to recognise that so many things can happen in a game. And when I did that game, and Spain scored in the first half, and what was quite painful about the Spain goal was I saw it coming a mile off because Lucy Bronze had drifted across the pitch and I'd seen all that space, and Spain is so secure on the ball that once they won it back, they were going to work it there. And then the ball went into the back of the net. And then the feeling of the game, never felt that England were going to score. And I just wanted the game to stay tight. And then near the end, maybe they could nick it. Didn't prove to be the case. And in the end, Mary Earps had to save a penalty. But the game, I never felt the game was going England's way at any point. So that idea of it being an amazing moment never did become the amazing moment. It feels bad because I'm taking away from the magic of that occasion. But I always felt like I'm near the line, but you know what? I'm not going to get there because this game is not going that way. It's funny how I'm coming across with that mindset, but that's actually how I felt during the game. And that was the exact sort of situation. So yes, certain different emotions to the Euros final. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So an anticipation, but a frustration. But then the payoff with the Euros as well, to commentate on, the glory of success as well. So,
yeah, that was sweet because in that game again, England fell behind, but it felt different. I felt they could get themselves back into it, and once it got to 1-1, they've been like that the whole tournament. It felt like a special tournament all round. So then you're really riding off the buzz of the game at that point, and you're enjoying every second of it. And it's one of the most enjoyable games I've ever done. And the fact that you've been on this journey with so many of these players, and Beth Mead took her first penalty and then she scored it, but she had to retake it. And then she failed with that retake. And then you're thinking, oh no, is this going to happen? Because then Spain missed their penalties early. I thought, this is going to be the moment. And then it comes to you, then there's the England supporter in you, but then there's the professional and remembering the audience. And it's interesting because I thought, this is going to be a balance thing here. You don't want to be going too over the top, because you have to recognise there'll be elements of people watching who probably really don't want England to win. But if England do win, the people who are going to be watching this over and over again are going to be England fans. So this has to feel special to that. So I just thought I'd give it the big one. I'd say my line, and then I'd let the crowd noise take over before diving back in again. And I think that's probably I think it's the right thing to do, because it's not my moment, but I also know you want to respect it as well, because it's a privilege to be able to be there to capture it.
Yeah, I mean, we've got another guest coming up soon as well, Adam Summerton, and he's had a recent moment with covering Crystal Palace's Europa Conference League win, and then similar to that, he got that right. It's that slight interjection of how massive a moment it is, but then letting the crowd and the atmosphere in the moment.
He had it with West Ham as well. He had it with West Ham.
He did. He had it with West Ham as well.
And this is, I think, what gets lost. And of course, we bring social media into these things, but ultimately, it's starting to bleed out, isn't it, to general media, what people think social media cares about, which it shouldn't really, because it's slightly irrelevant. When you look at the Champions League final and people having a go at TNT for being too Arsenal heavy, and I think with the Champions League final, a lot of neutrals do watch that game. It's a bit different to, say, the Conference League final, but a lot of people do watch the Euros final game. And if Arsenal had got over the line in that, then Arsenal supporters would be watching over and over and over again those moments, and they would revel in it, and they'd probably watch the whole show and play it all back time after time. And if it feels very Arsenal heavy, then that's the case. Think of any English club that's won that trophy and how they feel afterwards. And you'd think, to go back and, Istanbul, for example, that whole show, Liverpool supporters would love to have that whole off-air of the coverage and watch it again and again and again. And they'd want it to be so Liverpool. Of course they want it to be so. They'd want every second of it to be Liverpool. And I remember growing up, I never remember watching teams in Europe and the coverage in this country being, we have to have a balance for the team from abroad. It was always, we want the English team to win. That's all. I always remember it being that way. Be at the stadium, and every guest, every pundit, even if they didn't have a connection with that club, would be willing the English team to win. I feel like times have changed a bit because of social media's opened up that discourse to the whole world. So you have supporters of English clubs that live across the planet, and they don't feel that same way. And then that can influence supporters here and supporters who maybe don't have that connection. So it's all blurred a bit. I don't think TNT did much wrong in that respect, especially considering the occasion, and it was the fact it was Arsenal's first, Champions League final for a long time. And I think it should be the case if it's next season and it's Aston Villa in that final, I'd want them to do the same.
Absolutely, I'm totally with you on that, Seb. I mean, I was lucky enough to be in Istanbul, so I've never seen much of the coverage, and I would love to. I've always seen that end montage that Sky did with Sean Connery's voice doing the lyrics to "In My Life" and stuff like that, and hence I've written a book on Liverpool's 2005 Champions League success.
I was leading you into that. That was the idea.
It was a good segue there. Good segue, and a crowbar of a book in there.
I loved Euro '88, by the way.
I love writing Euro '88 as well. But speaking of Euros, Aidan, Euro '84. Aidan wrote a book on Euro '84. I mean, Seb, is kind of like view of our commentary. So there's an organic nature to it as well. But sometimes if you look at yourself and how you do something, it's fascinating there how Seb does his approach and his views on other commentaries and also kind of like that discourse of support nowadays.
I know, and it must be really pressured at certain moments to know that this is the little bit that's going to be replayed forever and ever. And for you, it's 5 seconds or 2 second stint in amongst several hours worth of work and concentration, and then sometimes we're all cynics, we can see the pre-planned things very well. I saw on Twitter today was the anniversary of David Beckham scoring against Argentina in 2002, and John Motson goes on about everyone can smash the plates and all of that. That's a strange one, because that was clearly planned. He'd clearly thought about it, and he was going to say it no matter what, and it didn't quite hit in the same way that something that comes a little more naturally and you just get carried away with the emotion, I think. Whereas we speak of 84, Watson, the way he commentated on Platini's goal in the semi-final, albeit for highlights, he was just bubbling over with excitement and enthusiasm, and that worked brilliantly. So it's not a criticism of him. He could do it fantastically. It's just you can always tell where it isn't quite like that, and it works so much better when it's just the excitement. But yeah, it must be pressured to know that your words are going to be immortalized in some ways if something major happens.
Definitely. I treat it in the way of, if you don't quite nail it, or you do get a bit wrong, or you have a regret over it, the moment is still there in pictures. It doesn't change the result, and there is that aspect to it. I know, like Hugh Johns in '66 had that sort of situation where obviously Kenneth had the immortal line, and everybody uses that. And in his particular commentary near the end, he misidentifies Martin Peters as Jeff Hurst's breaking, corrects himself, gets there in time, and then delivers the goal. But whenever I look back to that, it just makes me think it's like any moment in history. Once something's happened and it's there in history, it's part of it, and there's almost a charm to it, because you remember what live broadcasting is like. You are in the thick of it, you're caught up, and it's extra time. And I watched the extra time the other day when Channel 4 were showing a rerun of '66, and you didn't how tired the players were at the back end of that game, and how exhausted they were, and covering that would have been the same, with the idea that actually if Germany score here, we're going to a replay, which a lot of people didn't even realise. A World Cup final replay, how ridiculous is that? But that's how things were then. Penalty shootouts weren't a thing. So that to me is like that. Every single commentator has made an error in a big game of some sort. Some people notice them, some people don't. And that's the nature of the job. But the good thing about it, in the same way, the way footballers are, you always have a chance to redeem yourself in another game. There's always another game. There's always another big one on the horizon. And people just, they park that, move on, and go on to the next. And don't think people think, oh, he made an error in that final. People look at the other commentator and say, that's the line that we'll take from this. And that's how I think that's how you have to look at these things, because if you do make an error in comms, it does burn at you for a bit. But you do try to think, okay, on to the next one, crack on, don't dwell on that, on to the next game, and maybe we could pick up 3 points. It's that analogy,
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, you're right about that. Like, it's not if it's not the classic line hasn't been nailed, but it's still the moment though. And I think Aston Villa are the one for me with that, because that line that Brian Moore comes out with, it's not one of his best lines ever, without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah, Aston Villa fans absolutely wear it as a badge of honour. They've got that huge banner that stretches across with that line of commentary that looks so much better in print than it does when you listen to it. But
I always read it out in his voice though whenever I'm at Villa Park.
Yeah.
There it is. Get away.
Oh, outstanding stuff! Outstanding stuff. But Seb, we'll move on to France '98. We'll brilliant discussion there though. France '98. Why France '98 have we opted for on the Your Boys Talk of How Beaten World Cup jukebox?
So it's an interesting one, France '98. It has the football match I've been most engrossed in. It's had moments in it that taught me a lot. It's the World Cup that I fell in love with moments more than any other. Of all the other countries playing in it, it was the 32-team World Cup. It was the one that felt that we were closing in at the end of a millennium, and that marks itself out. I, at the time, would have been at secondary school, and I did my own wall chart, as in I drew my own wall chart. So I mapped it all out, and I had these little cartoon faces for every country. I went in big on it. It was like an art, because I one of the things I was studying was art, so I did a whole piece on it. What's annoying is I don't know where it is, so it's probably long gone, which is such a shame, because it was fantastic. I don't think anybody's ever seen anything like it, and if only it was here, I could prove that point. So because of that, I was engrossed in every game. I was across every game, and like I've said to people before, I always wanted to be a commentator from the age of 10. So even during secondary school years, all I wanted to do was commentary. So even then, I was getting statty about individual things, making a mark of every player who scored a goal. it was a quirky World Cup. It's probably the last World Cup where the qualification for it, especially in certain parts of the world, felt quite imbalanced. And there were some really big scorelines in the qualification from memory. And there was drama even in the qualification. I think I remember Australia under Terry Venables. There was an incident, I believe it was Iran they were facing in the playoffs, and a supporter ran on the pitch and it delayed it. And then Iran won, and the controversy around that. And even that felt weird. Things we couldn't really envisage happening now were happening then. The idea that the World Cup winning manager from 94 would then be managing Saudi Arabia in the next World Cup. Now, nowadays we'd say, well, yeah, we can see how that happened. But then it just didn't make any sense. It was a World Cup that still, where there were some legends that were still hanging on just about. You know, I'm thinking off the top of my head, Denmark with the Laudrup brothers. You go through little teams and they're the players that were just at the end of their time, but also big names that never were in the squads and look set to be in the squads. I know we've seen the Nike advert recently with Cole Palmer in it, but the Brazil Nike advert had Romario in it, and he wasn't in their squad. And there was a bit of issue around that. And obviously Gascoigne in the England squad. It's one of those tournaments, I genuinely think I could talk about it for 3 hours, because going through every group, there was something quirky, from Toni Polster's haircut to... I'm just thinking back to just the moment where the Scotland-Morocco game, Jim Leighton being lobbed in the way he was, and you had I think in that group as well, you had player names. There was Dan Egan and Chippo, and then you had Egan Chippo, and I'm just trying to think of things on the top of my head. Zidane getting sent off that everybody forgets about in the group stage. And he's one of the few players to have been sent off twice in a World Cup. One of the others being Rigobert Song, who was also sent off in this World Cup. So I think it's a World Cup that also had a special thing politically as well around France and them winning that competition, and Le Pen and his rhetoric beforehand. And I always remember Pele talking about the idea that an African side would win the World Cup for the end of the millennium, and people slightly laughed at him. But the influence of that 98 squad of France was something that really the tournament had never had before, and an example of diaspora and family ties and influence from other parts of the world on another country being able to win it in that way. I don't think, if we go back to the 30s and 1930s, there were a lot of, and even into the 50s, there were people playing for multiple countries and shifting around. But this is different. This was a completely different thing. These were people who'd settled over generations, ex-colonies of France, all coming together and deservedly winning the competition. They did have some luck along the way. Some beautiful goals in that competition. Dennis Bergkamp's fabulous goal against Argentina, which felt all the sweeter because of the round before. And I touched on it with the goal. Touching it there, saying that, the game I almost remember step by step was England-Argentina game. I think that game probably has affected me more than any other game I can remember, because so much happened in that game. And that game is probably a podcast in itself. You'll have to break it down even more, though, because like I say, there are countless reasons. And I think we always have this point in time. And anybody, if this is your first World Cup, go into it deep, go in hard, and you will never forget it. It'll be your World Cup that you remember. In 20, 30 years' time, you'll think that was the World Cup where I was really engrossed in it. Because 94 England weren't in it, and I felt a bit detached because of that. And 1990, I was a bit too young, and I felt I was. That's the other thing. When you're younger, sometimes you're catching on the edge of what other people are experiencing. But with 98, I had the build up to that, the whole lead up to that, because Euro 96 was so huge to me. At 98, I was just ready for it, and I was going to absorb every single part of it.
Yeah, we've said it a million times on podcasts and in print. We're all hardwired to the football of our youth. That tournament that it sets the tone, Aidan, and it's the one that you use as the yardstick for everything else that comes along. And after so long, it doesn't quite measure up afterwards. You always want. I'll come back to you in a second, Seb, about with a question I've got. But Aidan, everything that Seb's saying there, when he first mentioned that he was at high school, that perplexed me a little bit on the basis that for me, I was kind of like, what old would have been, about 8 when my first World Cup as such in 82 was the one that I go to. But it totally makes sense that, 1990 is just that little bit too early for him. 1994, England aren't involved, so there's a little bit of a detachment. But that first Impact World Cup, it really does set the tone.
Yeah, totally. And for me, I feel a little bit way about 1982 that Seb was talking about 1990 there, in that that's the first one I remember, and I remember bits of it really, really well, but I probably didn't live it in quite the full way that you can do for others because I was so young, not allowed to watch everything, presumably, and you try and watch as much as you can, whereas 86, other than the bits that were in the middle of the night, you're a bit more full on of it by that point. And then I guess 1990, still as a teenager at high school, you're fully absorbed in everything about it. When it comes to sort of 1998 as well, well, I suppose this exists to every tournament that follows that. They're all trying to live up to the ones that you remember and that you imagine everything should be like. The glory days of when you could just go out and play on the school field, replicate everything, go home, watch the football, not any other cares in the world. And it was great. But even some of those that come after can have elements of that. And I think as time goes by, they gain in the sort of cozy glow of nostalgia, I suppose. And France 98 is now, 28 years ago? Oh my God. That's that's a depressing thought in and of itself. But it's long enough for it to have settled in your mind about how good or otherwise it was. And there was a lot of really good stories about that. I mean, I'll throw in a few others like Paraguay with Chilavert, and will he get a goal, and how good he was against France in the knockout game and the golden goal that they got against them and so on. But you're absolutely right of things like the Netherlands-Argentina game, the England-Argentina game. You can go on the Dutch against Brazil in the semi-final and how magnificent that game was. And Ronaldo's goal scoring was just astonishing all the way up to the final where he wasn't really there. And even that in and of itself is a remarkable story to have got for a World Cup final. It really was. I mean, even at the time, I remember how dominant that was, obviously, in the build-up to it. But you think back now and you think, oh, how incredible that was. I mean, how can that possibly be allowed to happen? And even if he declared himself okay to play, why did anyone else allow it to happen? Why would they diminish their own chances in that way, or even to take him off when it was apparent he wasn't with it? I don't know. It just all adds to the conspiracy and the intrigue about it all, and just
you
makes
could
it
see
all
that
more...
at this World Cup, by the way.
Wow.
with Ronaldo, I could see exactly the same thing taking place if Portugal were to reach the showpiece. And Ronaldo, isn't he fit for this one? Maybe Portugal might be better without him, but he has to play.
I don't think there's much might about it. I think that the last Euros proved fairly conclusively they are superb without him and slightly more diminished with him. But yeah, he will have a big part to play one way or another in their tournament. We all know it. He knows it more than most, and I guess that's critical. Yeah, if they get to a semi or a final, he will be fully part of that. And that, yeah, you talked to some of the fading lights back in '98 as well. So we have that now, don't we, with the Messi and Ronaldo? And it'll be really interesting to see how big a part and how dominant they are coming up now. But anyway, yeah, back to '98. It wasn't as cozy in my mind as those in the '80s were, I guess. But you know, everyone is a different generation and has their own little ways of recalling it all. However, I was still at an age where I didn't have responsibilities beyond having to turn up to work. And as long as I did that, and we still all got to leave early. I remember the opening game must have been about 4 p.m. or something like that, English time. We all got to finish work early. Literally the entire office decamped somewhere together to watch all of that one. And that happened regularly throughout. So yeah, work didn't get too much in the way. So it was very, very good.
This was a World Cup that I totally agree with everything that's been said there about the fact that I think for me, being a kid of the 80s and everything has to be measured to 82 and to 86 and even 1990, you look at that and think nowhere near as good as 82 and 86 and the iconic surroundings of 90 and all of that. So you kind of like judge when you're in a position where you judge 1990 harshly, then you know that you really are kind of like sellotape to 82 and 86 with with gusto. But 98 has now become very much part of those World Cups of the past. There is that progression of time where once upon a time I looked at it as being a contemporary World Cup. Yeah, I don't now. And I probably still look on 2002 vaguely as a contemporary one, but I think now I'm starting to see goals crop up like Beckham's penalty. You see Ronaldinho's kind of like winner getting over David Seaman. You think, no, actually, that does start now to look of its age. So I think by the time that the next World Cup rolls around, I'll feel exactly the same about 2002 as I do about 98, as it being part of the old currency rather than the new currency. But going back to 98, what I was going to ask you was, you mentioned some of the nations, Toni Polster's her, so obviously Austria kind of like make a bit of an impact. I know from my perspective of 82 being that benchmark, how do you feel about teams that were involved in 1998 not being involved in a World Cup? I still want to see the teams that were involved in 82, all of them to qualify for a World Cup. So, having seen kind of New Zealand come back to a World Cup has been a glorious thing.
We just need El Salvador back, don't we?
That's
Steve?
what I was going to do.
We need Hungary back then, don't we?
Yeah, I think we've had Hungary back in the Euros, but we they were there in '86. That was that's why we get around Hungary. Hungary were involved in '86, so they have been. But I think El Salvador now and Honduras have been back to World Cups. I think El Salvador are the only one of 1982. Peru came back, for long last, which are always my South American team of favour. Because of that kit is just a magical thing, such a vivid thing.
What year was Kuwait? Was that 86 or 82?
No, that was 82. So you're right there. The other
Kuwait as well. Kuwait, I'm waiting for Kuwait and El Salvador to come back to a World Cup.
Only football could produce that sentence, couldn't it?
Exactly. How are you feeling about teams that were involved in 1998 not being involved in 2020? Does it unsettle you in the same way it unsettles me that Kuwait and El Salvador aren't, that Peru are not there this time around?
I think because it's such a big World Cup, some things just don't feel right. I mean, I'm thinking back to some of the big things I remember from 98. Two of the teams were Nigeria and Cameroon. I can't believe neither of those nations are in this tournament, considering it's been expanded. That just seems absurd, because to me, in my head, they were the two standout African nations of that era, and your brain extends the period of dominance, doesn't it? In your head, you think, oh, they're always good. And, it felt like about nearly 15 years after that, still talking about Bulgaria as if all the Kovs were playing for them, they were sort of doing the business. So this is what I'm saying. That's what makes it so great. They mark out time. And this is the scary thought. In 1998, the time that had passed to now, the time that's passed back to 1998, is the same period of time between that and 1970 World Cup, which doesn't feel right. So you want to try and modernise something. In 98, you'd have treated the 70 World Cup as still a distant thing and a mythical. I mean, I always see that World Cup as a mythical World Cup. It's quite a strange situation because there were many tournaments before 1970, but to me, 1970 is the pinnacle of the aesthetic of what the World Cup is to me. Because 86, you mentioned 86, but 86 almost was borrowing a bit off that 70 feeling because of the location, the Azteca, the South American influence, the South American winner, the fact that a great player with a number 10 or whatever, was the star. Being the first proper colour World Cup with Brazil winning it in that yellow strip, that imagery. And I don't go on X much, but I was on it and I just felt I had to mention it because I feel like I just don't think we'll ever have that again. And that's just maybe a technology thing. And the technology has been good for a long time now for us to watch games. So that's what changes it. I think when you look at countries that are in it now, this is why, a World Cup is never a World Cup without Brazil in it. And I think 70 is a big reason for that. I think you could maybe, every other nation, I think Brazil have to be in it, Argentina have to be in it, and Mexico have to be in it. They're the non-negotiables, I think. I think the Europeans can trade. You can lose one. We've lost Italy now for more than one on the trot. And I don't feel like I'm missing it in the same way as I would with Brazil, Argentina, Mexico. But that's probably because we have the Euros. That's the difference. I think they're the three that make it for. But as far as this time around, we've also, having new nations in it, is exciting in the same way it used to be, where a team would turn up and you know zero about them, absolutely nothing. We haven't had that too often recently, and we've often had a situation where there might be 1 or 2 players and we say, oh, but they've got this player. I mean, even with Uzbekistan, you know, people say, oh, they've got Kusanov. But we have Jordan, for example. Now, the English audience will know nothing. There's nothing to hang their hat on at all. Absolute clean slate. They'll turn the telly on and see this team and be like, okay, right, I don't know what to expect. Surprise me. And one player from Jordan will score a goal and have a moment, and it'll be etched in the history forever. And their team doesn't have to do anything else. If they go on and they want to do like a pack do it or whatever, some 66, if you want to be that kind of legend, then do so. But somebody, you just need that one goal that, you know, Robbie Earle 98 salute. That's all you need. That's it. It's done. You're there forever. And that's what makes the World Cup so brilliant.
Is your schedule going to take you to the Azteca at all, Seb?
You know, I still hope so. But the group stage, I have 3 games in Guadalajara. So, and unfortunately, it's not the same stadium as Gordon Banks' save in 70, which really, really upset me, because as soon as I saw Guadalajara, I went, because I've actually watched the entire game from 1970 of Brazil-England. I did a documentary about 15 years ago about that Brazil team, and 3 of the games I watched in their entirety, and that was one of the games I watched. I also watched them defeat Uruguay and the final itself. They were the 3 I watched every minute of, and it's fascinating to do that anyway. Not to go off on a tangent. There's so many tangents; they're all possible. But yeah, I just want to be able to tick it off. I know it's had renovations and stuff, but it's still, to me, it's the number 1 World Cup stadium. And that's me saying that, you know, that wasn't used in 98, but that it goes back to what I was saying about 70, and you're saying about 86. Part of me says that should be where the final is, you know, but it was never going to happen once the US was involved. So,
no, that's right. I'm still on for arranging a petition for the 2030 World Cup final to be taking place in Montevideo. That should be happening. That really should be happening.
I think the Bernabeu will have something to say about that. But I think Montevideo. Oh yes, so, it should be, shouldn't it? Really, but it'd be opening game. But that would be magnificent.
Yeah, it definitely should have been. Should have been a thing. But yeah, no, totally on board with 1970, because it is that icon. I do think I'd like both ITV and the BBC to come up with a red button option where you can distort the commentaries of all the games that are in Mexico, and to put a little bit of a haze on the screen as well. You take a yogurt pot, Seb, and see if you can commentate into that.
You're bang on. You're bang on. Yeah, none of this Dolby Atmos stuff. Let's have something that's not quite right, or you can hear me, but you know, I sound like I'm underwater. I actually agree with that. That'd be amazing. Or at least the option to put that effect on yourself. But the thing is, we can do that now, can't we? So maybe you could do that on one of the goals if in the opening game, because I think John Champion's doing it on the opening game. If he gets another, Shabba Lover type thing,
Oh, fantastic!
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Fantastic. No, it definitely needs to happen. Yeah, it's got to be unsettling seeing a game take place in a Mexican stadium and the images are crystal clear and you sound like you're in the next room. It really is not going to be.
There's not a bloke with a tash just doing that. Yeah.
This is the thing with World Cups in general now, is that you could look at an image from Qatar, from Russia, and from this upcoming World Cup and not have a clue which was where, because they all look the same. Like the stadiums all look the same. They all glossy. The production, everything's enhanced and looks terrific. So, terrific work by the people who are doing the television production. But
embrace the vuvuzela. That's what I say.
It all works. Well, crikey, well. You need something like that, don't you? You do need something like that. Spain 82 had that kind of backing noise as well, not just South Africa. But you need something to distinguish it, because it all is a little homogenized. Everything is clean and safe and wonderful in terms of how it looks. Let's not get into everything else around what it'll be like for those attending in USA.
I agree with so. And in a way, that's why I am started to really look forward to the 2026 World Cup, because some of those stadiums in America do look distinctive of one another. that point of the homogenisation of a lot of modern stadia, and it's kind of like you could be just airdropping that stadium into any city within huge amounts of the vast majority of the world there. But yeah, I do like that. It's like the England New Zealand friendly, and just the clunkiness of the stadium. I'd love a clunky
with a pirate
stadium.
ship.
I love a clunky stadium that looks a bit like a pirate ship.
I wonder if that's going to be the case, because that's not one of the venues, and I just wonder if they'll say they'll be so sanitized is the way, isn't it, that they will maybe lose their charm a bit when the game rolls into town, because it's the identikit graphics and the graphics do provide us a difference, don't they? They're the ones, the score bugs are different, the ball is different. But granted, they are trying some things for this tournament. They have these debut patches on the shirts, and the funniest thing about it is that, and also the teams out could be a bit different here. They tried it in the Club World Cup, but I think they're going for something really different on this one. It's not quite been nailed down. There's a little secret element that I'm not allowed to tell you, but I also think that they're going to be something that people will look at now and go, "Oh, I can't believe they're doing this." But then you'll go forward and you'll say, that was the World Cup, they did that. And we'll either say it was hilarious that they did that, or say that changed everything. Either way, it will be a marker. And I don't mind every tournament trying something a bit different, and every tournament having a new law brought in that makes us go, oh, that was the year where we had goal line technology. That was the first one where the back pass rule came in. And you have little markers in time as the game goes on, without totally changing what we actually love about the game. A lot of these things can annoy us from time to time, but we still stay in touch with it because the basic fundamentals will always be there.
France 98 was the first to have golden goal, wasn't it? I think it was only 98 and 2002 that had that in terms of World Cups. We'd seen it in 96. Obviously, the final was decided on the golden goal. England semi not quite decided on it. And I think, the France-Paraguay that I mentioned before was the only one that actually got settled that way. But yeah, it marks it in time, doesn't it, to have got that golden goal, because it was a fine idea. I kind of thought it would be something that would work. You see it in other sports, especially North American sports, don't you, with the sort of sudden death element, but it didn't quite work. So I guess, yes, it marks a place in time, doesn't it?
Yeah, I do wonder. I am surprised they've not brought this in to do that same the golden goal concept with no fixed time, with no fixed time to it. That somebody hasn't trialed that, because I don't think they seem to care too much about player welfare anyway. So the idea that the players just keep going on and on and on until we get a winner would have been interesting, because it does make you think. I think knowing that the time is going to be up at some point, players react to that, and I think they just think, just 2 more minutes to just get through this, and then maybe penalties feels less. It's more we might win it, and the effort we have to put in to lose it in extra time. I mean, I would say losing a game in extra time, in hindsight, always feels more palatable than losing a penalty shootout, because you think, oh my gosh, we could have won that penalty shootout. But at least if you're beaten in extra time, it's like, well, you lost the game. The penalty shootouts are. I wish there was another way, but there just hasn't been one that people have gone with. I just wonder if maybe, I don't think it's going to go that way because all the talk about welfare, but whether we do reach a point where they just say, keep going until you score.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that being mentioned one time with respect to kind of like removing a player every few minutes or something as well.
Oh my God, that's even worse. So I remember that one.
Yeah, it could come down to
the goalkeepers. Yeah.
It's like the reverse of being picked on the playground, isn't it? So the worst ones get left to last there. Well, here it's like you're first off. You're clearly the most most dispensable.
The manager.
Yeah. That would be fascinating, because it would be up to the manager to decide which player they want to remove.
Mm-hmm. Do they both have to decide at exactly the same moment? You can't be, he's taken off a right winger, so I'll take my left back off. No,
you submit it into a little to the fourth official secretly, and then they announce it. And I don't know. They don't know. That'd be a really tactically interesting element, because who is the player you're taking off? You're probably looking at the fitness of your players and saying who's the most tired at this moment in time. It could be something as simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no additional substitutions as well as part of that. Yeah,
grind them into the ground, mercenaries.
There'd be an element of Japanese game show. What was the one that Clive James used to do on endurance, was it, and stuff
I
like
thought
that.
you were talking about Squid Games there for a second.
Oh, no,
that's
yeah.
I was thinking Battle Royale or something like that.
Battle Royale, yeah. Takeshi's Castle, all that type of thing. Yeah. But 98 though did have a lot of those distinctions though that we were speaking about. You know, that you see a game from France 98, it's unmistakably France 98, and for me, it's kind of like the I don't know, kind of the big billowing nets play part in that as well, which you did have in 94 as well. But I mean, the stadia, you could identify each stadia pretty much game on game, as mentioned, the golden goals and all of that.
I would also say what makes 98 stand out to me is the music as well, tied to that World Cup, both in adverts, the official songs, and obviously the national songs, you know, for the England songs and things. Because I can't think of many World Cups that had so much music tied to it in that way. I wish I could remember what it was called off the top of my head, but you know, that Dario G, was it?
Yeah, I think
we use that. We just think that's a football song forever. But that was the World Cup for that. I wish I'd had these songs written down. I wish I could remember them all. I remember Scotland's official song was something like "Don't Come Home Too Soon." I remember that.
Delamitri.
Vindaloo, of course, which is interesting because I think if England had gone deeper into the tournament, I think it would have the same standing as Three Lions. But because England went out relatively early, I suppose it sort of came and went. But absolute classic England song that you can still just drop. It feels so relevant to the time. And you know, it's funny now because we're in this period now where there'd be people in their 40s and who their nostalgic bit that they love to get connected to is that era of the 90s, and it's all changed since then. And look what they used to do on the Big Breakfast, and they couldn't do that anymore. And the Word, and GI Fridays and stuff. And Vindaloo is probably a reference of that, because if you ever watch that video again, you're like, oh my god, they couldn't release a video like this now. This massive guy wobbling around down the street, you couldn't do that now. Just even the pop music around at the time as well. But I connect so much to that. The Brazilian Nike advert, the music for that has gone down in legend. Even the advert itself, people still reference that as being the big advert in this era that we've had of Nike and Adidas producing these mini films. That's still the reference point for so many people. So I think from a cultural point of view, that World Cup feels powerful for that as well. And maybe that was the start of that side of things, in a way that, because it's the start of the internet. And so while it wasn't as widespread as it would have been, by the next tournament, people were still able, the dial-up was working, AOL was kicking in. We're starting to have something where the internet becomes an important point. BBC would have had web page at that point. So that's, to me, it feels like a technological marker, a cultural marker. And many people forget that tournament a bit as well, because England went out relatively early. But, having a first-time winner, and even if that had been my second World Cup, I still think I would have held it in higher regard. It being the first one that I delved into in that way is important, but it still carries its weight across the whole history of World Cups. And I could argue for it, certainly, without getting too sucked in by my own nostalgia.
Just before you go off onto other things, Stephen, when Seb, you were talking of the music and things there, I was thinking I wonder whether this tournament saw the TV montages at the end of games come in more.
Yes.
I'm not sure, because I remember some really distinctly from this tournament, such as when you mentioned the music, so Samba de Janeiro, when you're looking at Ronaldo racing through and scoring, there was all sorts of montages of that. We had Des Lynam reciting If when we're looking at Michael Owen after England's defeat, obviously, and things like that, which they're the kind of things that you really, really remember from World Cups now. They sort of tug on your heartstrings a little bit, and they're really, really well done. That was something I can think back to those from France 98. I can't think hugely too many of them early. I know there were little bits and pieces early. We talked about Adamski Killer in 1990 and things like that, but I don't know that it was done quite as much or as well So maybe 98 was where that really started to push on from the TV, and I think
The
it's
title
something that
music
adds
as well.
so much.
The title music for the BBC and ITVs. I think BBC on that one.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think ITV went a bit more upbeat.
Bit more techno, weren't they?
Yeah, definitely techno. I'm not going to hum that one. It is in my head, but I don't think I'm capable of that. I just about got that last one out. So these things they're lodged in there, even if you can't sing them perfectly. They are lodged in there, and yeah, I agree. I don't think if somebody told me to write down all the World Cups and all the music you remember, be it the titles, video montages, and releases, official releases and unofficial releases and things tied to teams, I think that's the World Cup that comes up the most for me.
Yeah, I mean, in sensory terms, there's definitely a crossover of eras and such. Aidan's mentioned Des Lynam and the If and all that type of stuff. So you've got Des and everyone kind of like, I think it's 1990 and Nessun Dorma and all of that. 1986 where he's asking Terry Venables and Gary Lineker about a possible impending transfer to Barcelona for Laurie McMenemy. Tears of a strip. And the type of things that wouldn't happen in one World Cup that would happen in another. I mean, 98 are always evocative for me on the basis that it was the BBC doing the backdrop for the first time, the big iconic backdrop. It was like, I think it was the Champs-Elysees and the Arc de Triomphe.
Yeah.
And I can remember them doing, after one game or before kick-off of one game, they went out onto the balcony and with a camera and kind of like they were pointing out kind of like, there's Montmartre, etc., the Eiffel Tower. And it was kind of like the added bits of culture. You still had elements of kind of like World Cup presentation gone by, but you also had big nods to the future. You mentioned like the adverts and stuff. Going back to like don't come home too soon, Delamitri. That Brazilian advert, the night one and around the airport and all that type of stuff. It has been mimicked so many times since. And it was mimicked.
I mean, wasn't it mimicked by Scotland at that time?
Yeah. It was
in that video.
They did a parody of it in the video, and it was like Gordon Jury was kind of like taking the penalty, puts his collar up like Eric Cantona and kind of and all this type of stuff. It does have that, it still had that slight self-depreciation, but also, it had a little bit of everything in terms of culture, familiarity, comfort, something new. The further it drifts away, 98, the more important it seems.
You said Gordon Jury there. I think it was also one of the last World Cups where we cross over into that world of footballers now are celebrities with huge wealth, huge teams around them, PR teams, people who keep an eye on them. They have investments that mean they look after their whole life. But this was the last era where money was starting to come in for players, and some players were beginning to get wealthy, but there was also players who were still in that previous generation where, they could just go down to the pub and just mingle with the fans and still feel like one of those on the terraces. But that also meant they were maybe a bit lonely when it came to financial knowledge and maybe staying out of trouble sometimes. And this is actually a World Cup where a lot of players from all over the world, there's some wacky stories. I remember going back in time, I think there's players playing who are arrested, who've been in jail since then. There are players who've been caught up in really interesting schemes. But I think Gordon Jury himself, got himself into an issue involved in a scam or something where he was the victim of it. So many players now, you think these things just wouldn't happen to players now because they don't feel so vulnerable, because they've got people around them making sure they don't take a wrong step, they don't speak to the wrong people, they're not hanging out in the wrong place. And when they do, they can clear up all the press around it. There, I think players were exposed and the tabloids would go after them hard. And even at that time, they were listening into their calls, weren't they, at that time? That's that sort of era as well. So very vulnerable. But I think that's also what made supporters love them so much, because they felt so in touch with them still. And you have to go through, which can't go through every country, but, the ones close to home, you go through that Scotland squad and it's full of so many people you just think, it'd be nice to go for a drink with that guy. They're just full of go through that team. And the fact that John Collins felt the sort of classiest and most in touch with European football and the one, the little edge to it. And he felt exotic in a way of all the players in the team. That's the stage we were at now. Whereas, yeah, that can feel a bit lost nowadays, and it's hard because the game's become commercially so big now, and because of the success of tournaments like France and Nigeria, because more and more people got on board with it, more countries were in that World Cup, and that was it. It was open, floodgates were open, and everybody came piling through and thought, you know what, this is where we want to be, and it's grown from there. And the growth of the Premier League, I think that's also probably the first tournament where the Premier League would have had the most players of any other league in the world, because it was starting to hit that point where they were able to attract big talent and younger talent. A lot of older players were playing in the Premier League, a lot of older players who'd had their moment in Serie A at the time and were coming to the back end of the career were popping up in the English top flight at that time. But we're starting to see a trend where players are playing in the Premier League in their prime, and all these things, I think, play into it. So it's that sweet spot again. That's what I'm saying. It's that crossover of, it felt right on the zero, not to get religious.
Yeah, no, but yeah, you're right. It does get kind of like, it's where the belly button goes outy rather than anything.
Yeah.
As football, I mean, Aidan, you mentioned Des Lynam earlier on. That line of shouldn't you be at work?
Shouldn't you be at work?
Just popped into mind, thinking, yeah, I did. I took the afternoon off work for that one. Also, yeah. It felt like an expansion, but also kind of you were still watching football with your mates, and it did. It had all of that. I mean, in terms of games and goals, Seb, and I'll ask you as well, Aidan, so the standout on pitch moments that automatically spring to mind when mentioned the 1998 World Cup.
There's loads. There's absolutely loads. As soon as you said it, I thought, just went, right, think of one off the top of your head. I think it was Elise's goal against Spain, the winner. It was 3-2 Nigeria, Spain. That felt like a classic game. So much was going on. And it's a moment in time. Raul scored in that game for Spain. And at that point, you think, well, Spain are going to win this game from here. And then Nigeria, terrible error from Zubizarreta, I think. I'm trying to think. Lawal. These are the names that pop into your head. Lawal, I think, scored at the near post. Such a bizarre error from the goalkeeper. But Elise's goal just felt perfect. When it's the goal that I think is the most satisfying for a midfielder to score. It felt very Gerrard, it felt very edge of the box, hit it, you beauty. Like one of those moments, and just the timing of it, bang on. I mean, we mentioned the Bergkamp goal, we have the Michael Owen goal, random goal scores. I think of Robert Yarni against Germany. I mean, that game felt very satisfying. That German team felt like they were trying to squeeze final drops of success out of a team. You're talking about a team that had, I think Mateus was still in that team, Klinsmann was in that team. These are older players. Maybe Jürgen Koller was in that team. We're talking about the end. I wouldn't be surprised if the average age of that Germany team was probably over 30. I don't remember any real young talent being in that squad whatsoever, and they were almost trying to get everything out of it, considering that they'd been in, I mean, it felt like they'd been in every final. I was just thinking back to those. Think back and you think, 82, 86, 90, and they're just the World Cups. Or they're the Euros, 92, and winning it in 96. It just absolutely blows by how dominant they were. So I would understand why they were trying to squeeze everything out of that. But Croatia, who felt fresh, I mean, literally a new country, and then putting on a show, reaching the semi-finals in that way. And Yarni, I don't think he ever scored for Croatia again, scoring the goal in that game. The fact that Suker was top goal scorer. The fact that to beat Croatia required something that, to me, at the time, I keep looking back and thinking this must have been fixed for Lilian Thuram to score twice in a semi-final. And the way he scored the goals as well, it just felt just absolute chance of goals. I think I remember Platini saying that they'd fixed the draw so that Brazil and France would avoid each other to the final. And that's one of those dodgy situations that I actually thought, I don't mind that. It's no different to Wimbledon, is it? And this World Cup is following that same thing. They've taken the top 4 ranked sides and they've split them up. if they win their group, of course. That's the other element of it, isn't it? You know, you can keep them apart, but if they don't win their groups, then it all messes it up. So England can't meet Spain or France until the final if they all win their groups. That sort of way of doing it. So, finding that out, I thought, I don't mind that too much. That's what I would say. You mentioned if there'd one moment I hoped the ball would go into the net, it would have been Chilavert when he took that free kick, which I think was the first free kick from a goalkeeper. It's the sort of thing you go back to school and everybody's saying, I want goalkeepers are cool again. Campos in his multicoloured shirts that he'd launched in 94, he was back in 98, a short goalkeeper. I think Blanco's skill, I haven't mentioned that yet, his hop skill, which I think people often did in the playground. I just thought this is not a transferable skill to top level football. And somehow it felt the most eye-catching, pointless skill of all time. And people actually also forget he scored a brilliant goal in that tournament. It was like I don't even describe it off the top of my head. I need to see it again. It almost felt like it was like was it scissor kick? It was at the angle. I need to see it. This is the thing. I don't think I've seen that goal for probably like 15 years, 20 years. But I remember it being brilliant. That felt like a classic goal. There was a goal that was strangely satisfying for me. The Cameroon-Austria game. I mentioned Toni Polster and I think Austria, remember, they were scoring all their goals in the last minute, but he scored a goal against Cameroon that came right at the end, and he absolutely thumped it from about a yard out. It didn't require that sort of power to put it into the back of the net, but he whacked it anyway. Satisfying. In Janka, who scored the goal in that, the way he jinked one way, jinked back the other way and put it in the corner. It wasn't as silky as it could be, but it was satisfying. Kluivert's header in the semi-final, his downward hard header, satisfying. So not the greatest goals, but really ones you watch and just say, that's good. Oh, I like that. I really like that. So there's some for you there.
Oh, fantastic. I've just had a quick look, checked up on the Germany squad there. Of the 22, 12 of them were in their 30s. Mateus was 37.
Who's the youngest in that squad?
The youngest in that squad, we've got Christian Verms is 26.
He's one of the youngest at 26.
Jens Jeremy's 24. Yeah, no one is under the age of 24 in that Germany squad.
That's absolutely ridiculous, isn't it? He's 26 and he's one of the youngest ones. And then you got Michael Owen running out. Because I think there was a lot of young players. I think Eto'o might have played in that tournament, maybe 18 or something, or Babiaro, obviously Michael Owen. Yeah, the younger players were getting runouts in games, so it seems amazing. I mean, it would have been, Henri. How old would Henri have been then? Maybe 21, something like that, when he was in that team. Trezeguet the same. I mean, there were players that were around at that time. Yeah, I mean, there's little aspects around it as well. When I think of the Brazil team, and Denilson had just gone for a record fee, hadn't he? And he was the most expensive player there in the world. A transfer to this day that still makes no sense, but for some reason really caught the eye at that time. And my favourite foreign player of that time, without a doubt, was Rivaldo. And if I could have a statue of a foreign player outside my house, it would be of that man. And he would look the part as well. He's just got such a unique look. He's almost like skeletorial, but in as complimentary a way as I could. In the same way that Zidane's got just this chiseled face that just feel like you could make the perfect statue out of them.
Yeah, kind of Roman emperor type of guy,
it's just
wasn't he? Kind of like Zidane has got.
Yeah, but these tall players that had amazing technique. And Rivaldo felt a bit underappreciated, I would say, in that time. I think the goals he scored were so important just for club and country. And I think sometimes to some people, maybe he was almost too tall, and that meant that centre of gravity, he didn't look as nippy as others did when they were dribbling. But I just thought he was absolutely right up my street. I just thought he was fantastic. Absolutely
was. I mean, Aidan, your on-pitch go-to images of the '98 World Cup?
Well, I think we've covered a lot of them. What I would add to that is the USA-Iran group game. Which we'll get another one of potentially this year if they both get through. And that, well, God knows how that will turn out if that has to happen. They did have another one last time around. It didn't have quite the same fanfare as in 1998, but that was a special moment in memory, not so much for the USA on the field, I suppose, but it was very iconic, very iconic. And beyond that, I think it's some of the big games in the knockouts are obviously what you recall the most. I remember the Brazil-Chile game in the last 16, and even the national anthems in that were quite spectacular. And then the football was memorable as well. Ronaldo was superb. We kept having to cut to pictures of his girlfriend in the stands. I remember was a regular occurrence in that tournament too. But yeah, then England, Argentina, incredible game. All the stories and narratives around that one. I remember they made a documentary about it not long after, called Pride, Passion, and Penalties, and that was quite an interesting one to watch. But yeah, I remember that game vividly, every single moment of it. It was quite draining for those of us watching, let alone those playing. But that then, of course, as Seb mentioned earlier, the fact when Bergkamp scored his wondrous goal for the Dutch against Argentina in the next game, that felt like vindication for England in some way. It was very satisfying, I think. But yeah, and then obviously the final itself is memorable for reasons that aren't so much on the footballing field. Interesting that I think was it the first red card for a winning team, perhaps, in a final. We'd had a couple of red cards for Argentina in 1990, hadn't we? Desai got sent off, and he wondered whether that would put a spanner in the works. It was 2-0 at the time, I think. But Zidane's 2 goals in the final were more or less identical. They'd realised that Brazil just went to sleep a bit at corners, and if he drifted to the near post, he would have a free header, and it worked to perfection twice. I can't remember if Zidane vomited in this game. He tended to vomit in every big game at big moments. So I'm sure he did at some point. And that's something we seem to have to hone in on as well. But yeah, and then the celebrations, obviously, when Petit scored his goal, and it was all certain by then. It was very nice for France. And it felt unusual to have a new winner. I think that's an odd thing about a tournament. We've only had 8 nations still that have won the World Cup. France being the 7th. There's only Spain that have done it since. And even that just felt odd in a way, in a nice way, but odd that we'd had 6 nations had won it for so long. The previous new one, I think, was probably Argentina, 78. So that's a long time prior. So for it to take 20 years to get another new nation, it was an oddity that felt quite satisfying as well.
Yeah, I was just going to mention the first host to win it for 20 years. Yeah, I remember that striking me as being quite monumental. And yes, France being first-time winners. But I can remember that quarter-final between Brazil and Denmark, the 3-2, and that being the game that I just loved. I couldn't take my eyes off that game. Rivaldo.
Even before that, Stephen, the fact that Denmark had demolished Nigeria, that was astonishing, really, when you think of how well, as Seb was saying, their group performance was fantastic. Or another image that sticks with me is the Nigerian fans painted entirely in the Nigerian flag, celebrating that game. But yeah, how they got demolished by Denmark in the last 16 was incredible. And then for Denmark to play so well against Brazil, as you say.
I'm telling you, this tournament, it just triggers. You mentioned about cutting to Ronaldo's partner in the stands. That would have been the first World Cup for that, really.
Yeah.
This what's going on in the crowd things that I know 94 may have done it a bit, but I felt that was the World Cup where we started caring about who was actually in the crowd. I think before then it was all irrelevant. You might cut to a dignitary or a crazy fan, but you never look for a celebrity watching the game in the crowd until that particular World Cup. And now you wouldn't be able to escape that. If there's somebody famous in the crowd at this World Cup, they will try and cut to them. I know they try to avoid that if they can, but if someone particularly notable, a Hollywood actor or something, that I can't.
Here's a question, Seb. On that, when they cut to them, does someone speak in your ear to tell you who it is, or do you have the pressure of who are they actually showing me here?
So there's 3 answers to that. If it's an outside broadcast in which the company I'm working for, it's theirs. So for example, with Sky. So Sky, on a Sky broadcast, they might choose to cut to somebody and they'll tell me they're coming to them. They'll tell me that they're going to come to that person. Or I'll pose it to them and I'll sort of say, is this person around? It'd be good to cut to this person. Then they'll go to them. If they're not in control, then I will not know who they're cutting to.
Which I guess is the World Cup case, isn't it, when it's a host?
Yes, which is why I think they'll be more disciplined with it. I know almost certainly if Infantino is at the game, they will cut to him. If Trump is at the game, they will cut to him. If Carney's at the game, they'll cut to him. They'll cut to the leaders, the three leaders, I would imagine. Dignitary-wise, it's an interesting one. Will they cut to old players? Possibly for the ones involved. We sometimes have access, and I hope we usually do on this, to the director's feed, so we'll know if they're planning to cut to somebody. So that's why I say there's a third answer. Sometimes that you can be, if you're at a game, you can have access to the host broadcast director. So HBS are the company who host broadcast the World Cup, and they should have access to that director. I'd hope so, because that is one of the most important elements. It's also important to know because you could be on one. What can sometimes happens is we'll be talking about one subject and then they'll cut to somebody in the crowd, but we're in the middle of our sentence seal and it feels a bit weird to cut out of that. And the co-commentator might be on a point, and then I see someone I recognise and think, I want to say who they are, but I'm not going to interrupt somebody talking to point out that Dua Lipa's in the crowd, even if I'm proud of myself for recognising her. And the other thing to remember is the pictures are the most important thing. So if you don't know who the person is, just don't say anything or talk about something else. It's always the best way. Don't try and guess. That is the worst. And I've seen it happen before. Someone thinks, I'm going to try and nail who this is. And you think, no. And I know my first game is South Korea, Czech Republic. And if they do cut to a South Korean legend in the crowd, I have to be sure I recognise that legend. Otherwise, I won't reference it. Because you don't want to get yourself in that scenario. It's much worse. It's better for there to be silence than for you to misidentify somebody. I think that's the right thing. Doesn't mean it won't happen. It could happen. Could be tempting fate. And there's Infantino, and then I realise, oh no, it's not. It's Pitbull. So you don't know what could happen in the end of these things. I hope that doesn't happen. I hope that's not the case. And it's just popped into my head that Mardavikia scored that goal for Iran. It's just Mardavikia. I remember his celebration as well. It's just the little triggers for a World Cup like this. And as Aidan was talking there, every time he mentioned a game that I hadn't mentioned yet, I had a story in my head. And I don't think there's a World Cup I can do that for, actually.
No, it's a great point. It is. I think if we can, certainly from mine and Aidan's perspective, define a World Cup as being one of ours or not one of ours, I think '98 has increasingly become one of ours. It really has. I mean, it's we're talking in broadcasting terms around like Des Line and stuff like that, but it needs to don't go forgotten that it was Brian Moore's last stand as well on ITV.
He was my absolute commentary hero for football, and I always, in a weird way, it always ticks away at the back of my mind, because whenever people ask like what makes a good commentator and all this sort of stuff, I always say to myself, it's actually something that you can't really measure because it's so subjective to so many people. And I would say what made him stand out for me was I felt he was so connected in what he was watching, but in a way there was an emotion to his voice, and his voice was obviously fantastic and so important. The gravitas was there. But I always said it was almost like you were watching a game for the first time with your dad, and your dad was guiding you through the game. And your dad might not always be on top of what's going on, but he's emotionally connected with what's going on. And therefore you feel safe with that. You feel like he's taking me on this journey and I'm happy here. So even in that World Cup, with all the stuff and the way it ended with the England game and the Keegan question and everything, I always, even back at the time, think that's exactly what was going through my mind. It's exactly what I would have said to my mate when we sat next to him. Come on, will he score? Will he score? Come on, David. Do you think Bates going to score this one? That's how that's the emotional tie-in in a game like that. He wouldn't have asked that question in the Italy-France game, would he? Because the emotional connection wasn't there. He's asking a former England great this question. Okay, so he is saying to him, he's asking for his expertise on it, but he's also asking for his emotional attachment. He's also saying to you, we're willing this to happen. In the noise that he makes when Gascoigne slides in '96, there's no words there. It's just a sound. And I think sounds say so much as well. Just, oh! But if you say it like you mean it, it's everything. It's better than saying, oh, Gascoigne's missed it, just the, oh! Because that's what everybody who was an English supporter at the time would have felt. That guttural pain of that mishappening. And to have that noise said, that's enough for me. And I tend to think about that. I don't think I've covered many games that have had that sort of emotional, symbolic moment in the same way as that Gascoigne one, but I would certainly treat it exactly the same. The agony of that, what would have been if he'd got his toe on the end of that, England would have probably been champions in our mind, because we'd have jumped ahead and won the final as well. So that's just the way the football mind works, isn't it? We sort of think, oh, that was a brilliant team, and that was the hardest hurdle, and if we got over that, then we would have won. But they would have been in the final, and that would be a moment to live in time, to never, ever forget.
Wonderful, wonderful stuff. Aidan, that final, it was so shrouded in. It was almost like an Agatha Christie. So in a way that, although we don't get the game that we all hoped it would be, and in a way, retrospectively, I've often looked back and think, if only the Netherlands had been able to take a few penalties in that semi-final and be in that Hiddink Dutch side to go up against France in the final, we would have had a classic. But even then, this France-Brazil final, because of everything that goes on in it, we couldn't have done without it in this World Cup.
No, that's true. And I guess the only thing about it is that all the intrigue that we thought and nefarious actions of, was it Nike, was it the Federation, this, that, and the other, and it turns out it wasn't really any of these things. It was just a player who wanted to play, which is slightly disappointing in the end. But it didn't stop us thinking all of this at the time. It must have been really awkward for those who were trying to deliver all the messages on the television coverage at the time, because they had half the story, really. And here's one team shirt. Oh, no, we'll have that back. Thanks. Here's another one. Almost having to just make it up as you went along for what may or may not be happening. It made it really quite iconic. Certainly, and given the game itself wasn't so iconic, because of that, it needed that to hang on to. It's worked out quite nicely to give it something to linger in the mind, I suppose, because other than that, it was a bit of a stroll. But going back to what I said near the start of quite how they didn't realise that we could just take Ronaldo off now. But maybe it's the pressure for Zagallo to have done that. To either leave him out or to take him off at half time, and then they still lose, well, you know exactly what's going to happen then, don't you? It'd be criticised forever.
Would indeed. Moving on to our and finally section. Seb, I've sent you a couple of links here. World Cup final day, 1998. We're impatiently waiting for an 8 o'clock kickoff. There's a TV guide to peruse. Select from the Sunday Mirror on this particular occasion, which has thrown up the intriguing lost channel of live TV that we were absolutely
just don't remember that
live TV. By. Yeah.
How could you access that, by the way? What would you have?
I don't remember that at all.
You'd have need probably very primitive kind of Virgin Media type of thing, I'd imagine. But anything that's caught your eye that you might want to watch before the football?
Well, I want to be with Sir Jim Rosenthal for me, watching the F1. I think that's where I would have been, especially at that point in time where I used to watch the F1 a lot in the 90s, actually. You know, the back end of Mansell, Damon Hill, and a Schumacher begun his journey into the record books. So I was into F1 at that time. So I most certainly would have been with watching ITV, funnily enough, at that point. And I used to love Jim Rosenthal as well, and still do love him. So yes, I think that's where I would have been. I was an EastEnders man, being a Southerner, and I used to watch that religiously as well. I actually don't think I've watched a single episode of Coronation Street in my whole life, an entire episode. Never. In the Battle of the Soaps, I was always Team East End. So, Yes.
I don't think you've missed out there. So.
Have I not missed it?
I'm sure we're upsetting a lot of people there by saying such thing, but you've not missed anything there.
You got to pick one side of the eye. I don't remember anybody doing both. That's all I can say.
Yeah, it's like Blur or Oasis. Yeah,
yes, exactly.
Three tenders thing going on.
Exactly.
Point of interest. Take a speculative guess at who might have won the British Grand Prix.
Oh my gosh! I'm going to go for Jacques Villeneuve.
Oh, third place. He was on the podium. Mika Hakkinen. Yeah, with Michael Schumacher second.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
David Coulthard a spirited fourth. Eddie Irvine fifth. Damon Hill down in seventh, which I think at that point...
Was he finished?
He was.
I was trying to set up a joke there. Forget it.
Oh, fantastic.
Oh, dear. Back to Scotland.
Aidan, anything off the TV that you're going to lean towards before making the big decision over which channel to watch for the final?
Well, you could start early because Escape to Victory was on BBC One in the morning. Speaking of grand finals in French stadiums in the edge of Paris, there's one for you. Stade de Colombe, as they famously say in the film. So, yeah, that's a good way to get things started.
It's also probably one of the last eras where they would, if they on a newspaper, they would make a reference to the war if England were playing Germany.
Well,
I think that would have 96 certainly did in 96, didn't they? But I think by 2000, I think that had stopped.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Sunday Grandstand seems to have a lot of horse racing on, Aidan. That's a disappointment.
But the Tour de France is on Channel 4 later on. I would loved a bit of that, and that's very on theme for 1998 World Cup.
True, actually. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And if people don't want to watch the football, or at least the first half of the football, you can watch From Here to Eternity on Channel 4 as well. It's some classic movies on.
That's another side of it, isn't it? What are people watching who aren't watching the final? Because in my head, everybody should be watching that, but of course they wouldn't have been.
No, and that's it. I think BBC Two are showing My Fair Lady at 7:30. So I think maybe people were watching something on live TV, if they could get it.
There's also a Three Tenors concert prior to the final on BBC as well, which obviously that's something that they were just ripping off from 1990. They did it again in 94, and they still seem to be doing it. But yeah, that should have stayed back in 1990, I think. Excellent
stuff. And finally, we normally do our top 40. What are we illegally recording from top 40? Hovered over play and record, but 1998. People are ripping CDs at this point, aren't they? And burning CDs.
Yeah.
And stuff.
Yeah, so, you'd still be, well, not me, but I knew of people who would record off the radio then. I used to record football commentaries off the radio.
Yes.
I
bet somewhere there's a box at my mum and dad's house that have still got like loads of Radio City commentaries from the 1980s.
It's like photos on your phone now. You think I'll never look at that photo ever again. It was a bit like that. You just record stuff, never to be. VHS as well. Yeah, I used to record everything off the telly with the VHS. And also there are a lot more options then because Channel 5 had just launched as well. Sorry, I didn't actually mean that link. I wasn't saying I was recording films that were on late at night on Channel 5. I'm just sort of making a point that there were other channels. Channel 4 used to have some really... Because obviously when you're a teenager as well, there's things you're not supposed to be watching that, Channel 4 would have funny things on late at night. You'd be like, I've got to stay up to watch this, to be rebellious, I'm supposed to watch it, sneak down and watch these things. Incredible. Yeah, but I would say at that time I was big into the charts. I was massive into the charts. I would say, you gave me the list earlier of what was in the official singles charts, and I'm looking through them now, and I would say I know every single one of these. I probably have to go down to some of these actually. I think I don't know them, and then if you played them,
you'd know.
I'll go, trying to think. Rendezvous 98. Which one's that? Can you remember that?
I don't
Jean-Michel Jarre.
Is that the
that I was saying earlier? Is it that?
No, Rendezvous. Oh God, no!
No, I don't think it is that.
It's not,
I think that's in the charts in a different position. That one you're thinking of. The BBC.
Oh no, Rendezvous is
which was ITV's. That was ITV's.
So that might have been that, yeah.
Oh, how timely is that? That's amazing.
The BBC one's in at 26, I think. Is it Pavan by 4?
Yes. So I think that might be it.
Yeah, John
people screaming now, going, "Yes, that it. Yes, no, it isn't. You idiot!" And the fact that 3 Lions is back again, they re-released it and did a whole verse around the Italy 0-0, which is amazing. That's what I'm saying. At that time, one game could make a song. Nowadays it's not enough. It's not enough. You think, but then we're just so desperate for something. They re-released that track. Absolutely fantastic.
It is. Vindaloo is in at 21, Aidan. Yeah. But yeah.
I would say the most of this list here, the song I would have had on repeat the most at that particular time would have been Ghetto Superstar, for sure, because I was a big Fugees fan.
Yeah.
And I particularly liked Maya at that time as well. And then also The Boy Is Mine, because actually this might sound strange, but I used to listen to a lot of R&B from female singers because I was really close to my mum, and she used to play a lot of that stuff. And it was, stay with me, I just used to love it. I still do to this day, to be honest. I was more of a female singer R&B person than I was, say, any other genre, which is absolutely bizarre because you think it'd be into Britpop or rap or something at that time. Yeah, for sure. Another level, that would have been more my sister, I think. I actually remember that Freak Me song. When I think back to that and the lyrics of that, I think the lyrics are something like, "Let me lick you up and down." But the way the the lyrics were said, it felt so innocent. But when you look back and you just think, oh my God, just singing that at the age of, people probably singing that at 13 or something. It's absolute nonsense. But I think the real hero in this entire list is C'est La Vie by Bewitched. I don't think people understand the hidden message of that song, and I'm not going to say it on this podcast, but it seems so innocent at the time. A little Irish group, just sort of seemingly happy, bright colours. But I think there's a dark undertone to that song that people aren't exactly aware of. Look it up. I'll put it.
I'm one of those people. Then I'm going to have to kind of look that up.
Have a look. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I'm going for Intergalactic by the Beastie Boys. At
what a song. Yeah.
An absolute banger. Aidan, is there anything there that I'm sure you still had C90 tapes at this point. And,
Horny by Moose T.
Yeah. Well, that's a memorable one. As is Dance the Night Away by the Mavericks. That was one that sticks in the mind and doesn't get out of your head. Carnival de Paris is the one in there, Seb, that you were thinking of earlier.
Yes, thank you.
That's in the chart.
Yes, thank you. Dario G. I did say Dario G earlier, didn't I?
You did.
Well, I think it's Pop Stars or something. This one.
There's an awful lot of World Cup themed stuff in the charts, definitely. What else would I actually like? I think Save Tonight, Eagle Eye Cherry, that was okay.
That
was quite well.
Yeah, that was a great song.
I've got to be honest though, Freak Me by Another Level at number 1. I have no idea what that is.
Oh, check it out, Aidan. Honestly. Let me lick you up and down. Honestly. That was one of the lyrics of the song.
Okay, all right, okay. I just don't remember.
Dane Bowers, I think he did a duet with Posh Spice not long after this. So these are sort of cultural references that are very important.
I mean, I don't know. I think there's a few by this point that don't resonate as well with me because I'm just into the mid-20s nearly, and it's like, I don't know, trying to be cooler. I don't know what it is. However, I do remember that the Teletubbies song, and that is in the chart as well. So there you go. We're not that cool.
Would you have liked, just thinking, Leanne Rimes, How Do I Live? That was a big hit at the time. Life by Desiree. I'm just trying to get a sense of what you like.
Come back to What You Know by Embrace is in there. Yeah,
that's what the charts were like though at that time. They
there's all sorts.
I think we're post Britpop here, really. We
are.
Yeah. So this is the stuff that was coming out, dancey tunes.
I remember Under the Bridge and Lady Marmalade by All Saints. That's an interesting combo. It was all right.
That was good. All Saints. I've got an appreciation of All Saints. Mrs. Scragg has got them on her playlist on Spotify. So when she kind of like attaches it to the car, you know what, All Saints, yeah. I know. And even looking back, I used to, kind of like I could recognise that they're damn good tunes that they kind of like put out there in terms of kind of like unadulterated, a great antidote to the Spice Girls, which
absolutely, which is
I'm going to have to stop
necessary.
scrolling here. I'm down to like 61, and I'm seeing Dana International, who won Eurovision that year.
Eurovision, yeah.
Diva,
98 was a phenomenal year. I'm telling you. I think
Rockefeller Skank by Fatboy Slim's in there.
Yeah.
That's one that certainly sticks in the mind too, Phil.
Do you know, just saying all this, I think if you think about it and what the role into that year, that season in football, essentially, that 97, the 97 felt like a really symbolic year for the country because obviously the new Labour came in. And I think most importantly, I think that was the last time that Britain won Eurovision with Katrina and the Waves, Love Shine a Light. These are the symbolic moments, the cultural impacts that we will remember in future millennia,
Yeah, a point in time when the UK wasn't quite as unpopular as it went on to become. No room for
Hong Kong did go back to China. I say back to China. It went to China. Yeah,
it did indeed. Yeah, and totally. I mean, you had Arsenal players winning World Cup winners' medals, and Arsenal players in the World Cup final. It was. Yeah, we've not even mentioned Nicholas Anelka, and would he go, and he didn't, and all these. There's a very young Henry and Trezeguet and all those in the squad. Yet France didn't seem to have a striker, and
Gosh, oh my gosh, one of the worst World Cup winners on paper.
And then he pitched up at my club a few weeks later, and he only scored one goal. And that was I think that was in defeat to Liverpool, and that even just bounced off the end of his toe for Newcastle. I mean, he obviously didn't score any in the World Cup. He was awful. How he has got a World Cup winners medal, I will never know. But there you go.
You got to have. France has had it's done that.
No, they had no Ginola, no Cantona, and yet bloody
when people ask why Jordan Henderson is in the current English squad, every World Cup winner has had players in their team or who have played in it that you just think, how was that player part of this winning side? And you go back through every single team and think, how did that happen? But that's the nature of the World Cup. Montiel. I do a lot of Nottingham Forest games. And Montiel popped up at Forest. Terrible, really average.
Scoring the winning penalty, didn't he?
Yeah. But who cares? Because he scored that moment was all that matters.
Wonderful stuff. Yeah, the mysteries of it's like Yuri Georgiev tipping up at Bolton Wanderers and stuff like that. That just seems so detached from reality.
Yeah,
it is. It's that precursor that suddenly kind of like the Premier League will become this, and it is morphing into that anyway because we've had a Spria that Aidan loves so much up at Newcastle. We've gone from like the Scandinavian influx of the early to mid 1990s to kind of like suddenly actually players of like epic repute are tipping up in the English game, and then that would escalate even further.
Yeah,
in the years to come, you would not associate English club football as being a landscape in which World Cup winning players would be strutting their stuff on that turf, and yet suddenly there's one in a Bolton Wanderers shirt, which is just utterly mind blowing.
Now we wouldn't think anything of it.
No, that's it.
You got Bournemouth players and Brentford players, and a Bournemouth player could be starting for Brazil.
That can still catch me off balance sometimes. It's like looking through old Italian squads from stuff and thinking, there's a West Ham player in there, there's a Southampton player in there. Like Argentina winning the last World Cup with a Brighton and Hove Albion midfielder. It's kind of it still has the power to knock me off balance. But in a wonderful way. Gentlemen, it's been a joy to do. Seb, you've got a bag to pack and a passport to locate. Just as a way out, are England in with a chance this time around?
I think so. I look at the England team, and the difference is a lot of people don't watch qualification games. They don't watch friendlies. They just look at results, and they look at the last thing they remember with the team. And during qualification, it was one of the most impressive qualifications from a tactical standpoint I think I've seen from an England side. They just look structurally really good, really dangerous, and defensively excellent. The friendlies they've looked a bit vulnerable on the counter, but I think they can be a team that will dominate the ball in a lot of games. And the question is going to be, it's going to be about the heat, obviously, but that's not going to just affect England. So many teams have players playing in Europe and playing in England as well. So I just think you have to go for it. And if they win their group and the other favourites win their group, it actually pans out relatively nicely. That people talk about Mexico in that. I don't even know if Mexico will be there, because who's to guarantee that they win their group? People think they're just going to get past Czech Republic and South Korea and South Africa. Who says that's going to happen? Could see them dropping points to all those teams. So we don't know what the pathway is going to be. We don't know what's going to happen. There's so many teams that could put together good performances, but so much of that I'm basing on them not stifling in the heat. Think of the Austrias and Japan in particular. We just think, how would their system work in this? That's the unknown. We will see. But from an England point of view, I feel quite positive about them, because they have a manager who knows how to win tournaments. Will all the England players get on with him as time goes on, and he might fall out with some of them? We will see. I don't have too much problem with the squad, because as is the way we always do this, we say we love the players that aren't picked. But these players were in squads before, right? Foden's been in numerous England squads already. Palmer's been in one already. And it's not like they've been making it, you have to pick us this season. And Tuchel's picked his team based on the players that basically did so well for him in qualifying. And that, I think you have to respect that, don't you? And then slag him off when it goes wrong.
I think there's a very Italian approach to it, a classical Italian approach to it. Why isn't Baggio in that squad? Well, he's just because Del Piero had an outstanding season. Yeah. I actually think that's a really good progressive thing to do. Seb, thanks so much. Aidan, enjoyed it?
Very much so. No, absolutely. Lovely bit of nostalgia. Always great. And we wish you well for the coming tournament, Seb.
And obviously, and you're wishing Anthony Gordon the best, aren't you, at Barcelona? Hope he hits the ground running.
Oh, I'm sure he will.
that Spanish twang is really impressive.
He's been secretly learning the language fluently.
Eddie Howe wasn't going to let him on the pitch in the last month or so he's had
that's true.
Time to do
that is very, very true. I'm sure you would have wanted.
Presumably didn't want to scupper the deal at that point. Yeah, the Lewis Hall one I don't get. I've got to be honest. Yeah. I don't see that Jed Spence is on the same level as Lewis Hall at all. But
yeah, it's a strange one. But I don't think it's going to be the difference between England doing well in the tournament. That's the thing. We'll see what is the difference, though. I'm sure we'll find it out.
When Big Dan Burns scores a header in the final, we'll all be jumping for joy.
Imagine? There we go. The story, statue, the 7'5" statue of him all around the world. Yeah, there'd be something so beautiful about that.
And you have to call him Big Dan Burns, Seb, if you're coming.
Yeah,
it's the rules.
I think there's Ballard and Byrne that can have big before them in the league. I don't think anyone else has the right for that.
It works with Dan then, obviously. Yeah.
Big Dan, exactly. Big DB. Anyway, on that note.
on that note, all that leaves me to do is to say thank you for listening, spread the word, and join us again next time on Your Boys Took a Hell of a Meeting. Thank you and goodbye.